Hi, I'm Christina. I'm astrology coach at Heart Horizon Astrology and host of Astrology with Heart. Welcome to episode 4, where we'll talk about the supermoon we have coming up in Taurus on the 5th of November and the Taurian archetype. Right, so this moon we have coming up on the 5th of November is another supermoon. Yes, another supermoon. It will be at 13 degrees 22 minutes of Taurus, and it will happen at 1:18 p.m. GMT. So I'm based in England, and I will mention them in GMT. If you're based somewhere else in the world, please remember to adjust your location for your charts. So Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus rules 2 signs, Libra and Taurus. Taurus being the feminine yin internal nature. It embodies the archetype of the Earth Priestess, a guardian of beauty, pleasure, and material wisdom. She teaches us to root our body, honor our senses, and cultivate abundance through patience and persistence. So Taurus is a real kind of slow, steady, calm, continuous. It's like a flat line kind of energy. It's very patient, and as a fixed sign, it does stay the path. It does persist with things in a very continuous, ploddy fashion. If you know the story of the tortoise and the hare, then Taurus is the tortoise. So every energy, I'm saying energy because Taurus, well, that's Taurus. Then you've got Venus, the ruler, same energy, and then you also have second house. So if the first house, Aries, is to follow our desires and create or initiate, so it's a bit like the Fool on the Fool's Journey, then the second house, Taurus, is a fixed sign, is to produce a foundation and build from that foundation. And building is really one of the primary themes of Taurus. So it beds in, it plants, slowly and very deliberately grows, and it's deeply connected to the rhythms of nature, to the earth beneath your feet, to the harvest of foods, kind of homegrown foods, and seasons. So it builds and it grows. It's also what we build in a very physical sense, and I affectionately call this house Bob the Builder's house. So buildings in any sense, also the building up of our self-finances, our possessions, so anything that we see tangibly. Another really big theme, and an unsurprising one with Taurus, is beauty. You know, with the ruler of Venus, what else? So this is beauty very much reflected inwards. So Libra is the external expression, and it rules relationships and partnerships. And so it's very much about others, or our interaction with others, the social realm. Whereas Taurus is very much about our relationship with ourselves. So houses 1 to 4 are self-development, and Taurus there is on the second house. So it's building inner security, building inner beauty, knowing that beauty comes from self-worth, not external validation like the Libra archetype can be. This is our own self-worth, self-esteem, our inner values and what we value and what we build within ourselves. In addition, the sensory system is very Taurian, unsurprisingly again. This is a very sensual sign. So any of the senses, be it visual, audio, what things feel like, the touch of things, the taste of things. And if you haven't realized it yet, then a lot of foodies, what we call foodies, are definitely Taurian. My uncle is a Taurian son, and everything is about food. Pheromones and sexual attractions, all Taurus. This is a sign of survival, and procreation is very integral to our survival as a species. So it's a very highly sexual sign, although the preference is on self-sufficiency and self, in opposition to Scorpio, which is about others, sharing of resources and pleasures. I want to talk a little bit about, as you know I like to, the shadow, the kind of darker side of Taurus, because every energy has a polarity as such. It has a real positive, healthy expression, and it has a kind of a negative shadow expression. So with Taurus being a fixed earth sign, it tends to bed down, root, and remain there. And this can really stifle any kind of growth. So be that a routine, a relationship, possessions, identities, anything that no longer serves, the archetype of Taurus can take a long time to move. And so it really fears disruption, it resists any kind of transformation, even when that transformation is necessary. Now, if anyone here has studied some astrology and would be familiar with some of the what I call the greats, then if you've heard of Jeffrey Wolf Green of the Evolutionary Astrology School in the USA, then he refers to Taurus as the frog in the well. So, you know, the frog is in the well, it's burrowed down, it's nice and safe and secure, and it looks out of the well and it sees a small piece of the sky, and it feels quite content in that. What the frog doesn't realize is that there's a very, very big world out there beyond that well, beyond that piece of sky that it sees. And so it's very reflective of Taurus to stay in that comfort zone, to stay where it feels secure and where it feels safe, and to not challenge itself into that sense of growth. And so this is something really, really quite integral to Taurus, and especially if we look at its opposing sign, which is Scorpio. So whenever there's a full moon, we have two signs, the sun and the moon, 180 degrees in exact opposition, and the two signs opposite, we call this an axis. And so there needs to be a balance in that interplay between the two signs. Now, in evolutionary astrology, Scorpio, Pluto energy holds huge, huge significance because it's seen as the seat of the soul, and the soul evolving and transforming at each, I say incarnation, but it depends on your belief system. So when we look at Taurus and opposite, we see a sign that is rooted so much in its comfort that it doesn't really want to move, and we see in its opposite sign the exact opposite of that, a sign that is very, very much about transformation. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that axis. So Taurus holds, Scorpio releases. It's the energy of death. Taurus builds, and Scorpio burns things down to ashes. Taurus is what I own as an individual. Scorpio is what we own, as in, in a shared sense. Taurus is a very physical sign, while Scorpio is more of a spiritual, emotional sign. Both signs are fixed, both are very, very strong, and both are quite resilient. So we find that Taurus thrives on consistency, beauty, and tangible results. It builds things slowly. It is very much about its central values, very loyal sign, and seeks emotional and financial security. But this can really lead to a state of stagnation or a real fear of change. And then Scorpio, by contrast, is emotional alchemy. Basically, it really dives into that kind of murky, shadowy space. It very much embraces the ending of things, but the ending of things in a cyclical sense. in that something ends and something begins, something ends and something begins, and there's a transformation that happens. And usually with Scorpio, it's through a major amount of intensity and focus. So I'd say we're likely to see a stirring of discomfort, definitely something around the theme of letting go, and more so if we've really over-identified or almost had a stranglehold on something that maybe we know isn't very good for us. So what would Taurus need to do to move into a state of evolution, to move into the state where it is working with its opposing sign, Scorpio? So releasing attachment to permanence, because Scorpio teaches us that nothing is permanent, nothing is truly secure. It's really something that moves from one state to another through transformation. And just because you built something doesn't mean you can't burn it down, right? You can start again. Exploring emotional depth. So, Scorpio is a fixed water sign, so it really favors kind of emotional intensity. And Taurus as a sign can be quite emotionally locked. And obviously, tying that to maintaining that sense of comfort, Scorpio teaches us to be uncomfortable with our emotions, in fact, uncomfortable with everything, to really learn to sit with it, to embrace it, and to let it guide you to a state of growth. Vulnerability is definitely something that we would see associated with Scorpio. That's something that Taurus could lean into more, to be more open, to go beyond that surface level and to go beyond that state of absolute safety. Because when it's just us, independent, we don't have to risk vulnerability through the act of sharing with another. There's a safety in kind of locking ourselves down or just being the only one that knows. And so it's, it can be very raw and very, very intimate to be able to open that up to other people. Owning your value while surrendering to change. Yeah, this is an interesting one, because Taurus really leads with its values. It's really quite a sign of integrity. If it says it's going to do something, it's going to do it. It shares that with Capricorn. But it also needs to learn when to surrender or be a little bit more open-minded about those values in order to transform, in order to change itself. And so that alchemy of Scorpio, just opening it up and going back to the frog in the well illustration to kind of understand that there is more sky to see, and so it can climb up the well a little bit to explore that. So definitely a teaching of it to move away from this over-attachment to comfort, to not resist depth in any sense, to allow itself to consider some risk if required, if where it is outworn its purpose. Jump in there and we're going to take a look at the chart for this supermoon in Taurus on the 5th of November. If you have your own natal chart already, please print it off, have it on your phone, keep it with you while we're talking so you can take a look at where some of these placements are going to impact on your own chart. If you don't have one and you think, yes, I quite like one, thank you. If you go to my website, there is a page there that will allow you to create a chart. You must have your date of birth, your place of birth, so the location, and ideally the exact time. And that will produce a chart for you, and you can kind of take a picture or you can download that or print it off. And it will really, really be handy, and this will make a lot more sense to you personally. So this is the chart. As you can see, it looks a bit chaotic there. I'm going to go simplify it for you. And by doing this little action, you can see that I'm just focusing now on the aspects to that supermoon. Now, if we just remove here some of these asteroids, that's Juno there and Pallas here, it's really not impacting too much directly. What it does influence is these little symbols here, which are the nodal axis. They look like horseshoes, one up and one down, and they'd be known as the south and north nodes. So the one here that looks more like an N is the north, and then one that looks like a U is the south. And there's these green lines linking between them. We've got a sextile to the north, and we've got a trine aspect to the south. So anything that influences on the nodal axis, if you do have an interest in evolutionary astrology, suggests that it will have an influence on our evolutionary path. And that would be in a collective sense as opposed to a personal sense. You do have a nodal axis in your natal chart as well. And so when we see a sextile and a trine, I mean, they'd be known as positive aspects, okay? But just to add a little bit more information on that, so a sextile in itself would be seen as a potential, but it does require you to put in a bit of effort. And a trine will be an easy flow. It would basically be an unhindered flow. So this moon, is going to very easily flow its energy to the south node. Now, the only thing with that is the south node represents where we've been, what we know already, where we are comfortable. It represents habits and behaviors and thoughts and feelings that we fall back on almost unconsciously. So in terms of evolution, it's not very helpful to keep falling back on what we know. We ideally need to put in the effort and move ourselves forward and challenge ourselves to think or feel or action into spaces that are quite new and as such are uncomfortable. And how reflective is that of what we were talking about Taurus and Scorpio? So, we do have to be aware right now that it could be very, very easy for us to fall into these, past behaviors. I don't know how this will look on the world stage, but, falling back into where we've been before. And it's going to take a little bit of effort, but it's definitely open to us. It's definitely possible to be able to move on to something new. And what could that look like? What would that energy look like? Well, the south node is in Virgo. Virgo known to be a very kind of structured, analytical sign. It really worries. It's quite anxious. It links to the nervous system. So it does like to plan. It does like to have a set of habits and behaviors that are quite repetitive. Whereas Pisces in opposition is more flowing. It's more allowing. It's more about, I don't need to plan too many steps ahead. I just need to start my journey. And I need to not go with my logical left brain. I need to be paying attention to the signs and symbolism of the universe and allowing things to unravel in a very natural, fluid way. Very, very difficult if you are already quite Virgo and, for your own comfort, you need to have some kind of structure or some kind of plan in place. As Pisces says, look, you don't need to be doing all that kind of analytical and planning work. I want you to trust me here. And it's going to take a little effort to do it. I want you to trust me here that things are going to go this way, and you allow things to unravel a little bit. So I'm just going to jump. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to jump onto Venus here because, my word, what are you doing today? Venus being the ruler of the full moon, so Venus being the ruler of Taurus, and Venus in this sense being almost like the conduit or facilitator of the energy of the full moon being about endings, completions, culminations. So what is going to facilitate, and this is a little bit more interesting now because you can see these quite pretty lines on here now, red and blue. We've got Venus in a square to Pluto, 1 degree of Aquarius, so it's slightly out of sign but still in the square, and on the other side to Jupiter in Cancer at 25 degrees, and Venus here being right at the pinnacle here. So there's two challenges going on. So whenever we see Pluto in a square to Venus, and Venus especially in Libra, we know that there's going to be some kind of challenge with partnerships, relationships, values, finances. Aquarius being very supportive of being future focused, let's move forward, let's progress, let's use tech, let's use science. This is more about space travel, up in the air, instant downloads going on. So let's break this down a little bit, this double square, which is referred to as a T-square. So it's a T-square here between two very heavyweight planets. We've got Pluto, 1 degree of Aquarius on one side, out of sign, but still a square. And we've got Jupiter in Cancer at 25 degrees on the other side. Two heavyweights, right? And I think this is going to add quite a bit of fanfare, quite a bit of drama going on. Pluto being in a fixed sign too might not be overly helpful. So we see that, Taurus is going to hold firm. It's going to stick to that comfort zone. Scorpio is going to challenge the soul to evolve spiritually, and Venus in Libra is going to want to be as happy and content and harmonious as possible. Jupiter in Cancer here, Cancer ruling moon and emotions, is going to definitely expand all of those Cancerian energies. So high sensitivity, emotionally a little bit volatile. It's on aspect to Pluto Aquarius. Aquarius could be quite volatile. Pluto also being a water sign. So this is definitely going to be emotionally intense, I would say, given Venus in Libra and the Cancer, that it could involve something happening on the home front, something on the personal home front, something to do with relationships, definitely maybe a tenseness around relationships. Could be with a Pluto to Venus square, betrayal of some kind. I don't want to be too specific on the details, but this can represent jealousy, possessiveness, emotional manipulation. It can be a betrayal in terms of a love affair, even an emotional affair. It doesn't have to be a physical one, but often with Pluto it tends to get that way as well. And with Jupiter amplifying Cancer being the home, the family, the personal life, this could be a lot of drama and a lot of chaos on the home front, lightly to do with some kind of manipulation or betrayal. We're looking at it from a personal viewpoint. We also have going on another major aspect. Oh no, not another yod. Yes, another yod. And this one a little bit more complex, although it doesn't show it on here. Saturn is here at 25 degrees too, so I would still count that in there. So we've got this blue line here between Venus and Neptune at 29 Pisces. Also imagine the Saturn there at 25 Pisces. This with a little kicky K on it, that's an inconjunct. And then we have another one down here to Uranus in Gemini at 0 degrees. And just imagine between the two of them at the bottom there is a sextile between Neptune, Saturn and Uranus going on. And I mentioned a yod pattern in the last episode because we had a new moon there that had a yod pattern. So they tend to be awkward. The way forward is fraught with brambles, I've put. Yes, very much so. No matter what you're going to do, it's going to hurt. And I think it will hurt. I think it will hurt. I mean, this is an aspect that requires major adjustment. You kind of have to imagine that the planets at two ends here, they don't have a lot in common with each other, and so they don't really understand each other. And so they have to reposition in a way that doesn't feel familiar in any way. So what could we be referring to? Well, again, we said that Venus was very much about relationships, values, finances, and about diplomacy, harmony, maintaining the middle ground, considering what other people want, people-pleasing tendencies. And we've got here Neptune, as I say, imagine Saturn is there as well. Very strong Piscean energy here because both of those planets are in Pisces, but also because Neptune's at 29, which is the anaretic degree, which is the final degree before it changes signs, and so it tends to contain the fullness of the archetype. And so with this symbolism here, we could be looking at boundaries. Saturn would be about boundaries, and with Pisces there, they'd be quite permeable. So it may be overstepping a boundary in some way. Maybe pushing our boundaries. On a plus sign, I would say forgiveness. And if we consider that, and this is just a possibility, some kind of betrayal or manipulation going on that's quite intense, that could really affect things on the home front, I think we could agree that any kind of forgiveness, it would be very, very difficult to get to. These two signs also could be about illusions, disillusionment, finally realizing Saturn being reality, the reality of what is happening, which could be quite jarring and uncomfortable, and having to deal with that, being, with a lot of kind of heavy emotional intensity going on. We could also see something to do with sacrifice. Pisces would be sacrifice too. So in this situation where something's kind of blowing up and really heated, do we have to make some kind of sacrifice, a very challenging sacrifice? And we've got here Uranus, and with Uranus, sudden, shocking, majorly surprising, unexpected. Expect the unexpected with Uranus around. In Gemini, to do with information, could be a conversation, could be something we've read, could be a text message from somebody, a WhatsApp message, something we've read on the internet, something we've seen. So some kind of data, some piece of information that is shocking or quite surprising or very unexpected, something that would really rock your foundations here. And foundations also comes under Cancer, it's our psychological foundation. So forewarning is forearming, okay? And as I say, I'm not saying that this is definitely going to happen or something awful is going to happen in your life, but to know that we have some disruptive energies going on means that, in a sense, your mind can prepare, okay, something might happen. Something might happen that might be very emotional and might be quite destructive for me personally, but I need to be mentally prepared and know that whatever it is, I will handle it. I mean, this is one thing about Uranus, is it's the progressive futuristic sign. It knows how to move forward, and it knows how to kind of chop things quite coolly. So, that can be a little bit of a balancing point with much emotion going on. But on the collective stage, for some reason, my spidey sense is saying taxes. I don't know why. Taxes. Perhaps with that Pluto there. And we are seeing a lot kind of bleeding into the news now about taxes and what's going to happen, especially in the UK. So I don't know what's happening elsewhere in the world. I want to say thanks again for listening in. All of the links associated with this video or podcast, depending on how you're viewing or listening, are below in the notes. You can see the blog post there, which will give you access to read a little bit more at your leisure, but also to view the chart. There's a chart in there too. Do share. Do leave reviews, do comment, and even come find me on Instagram and TikTok, wherever feels really good for you. I will be back in a few weeks with episode